Hey guys, my name is Steve Richert. I am an adventure photographer, filmmaker, and I do a lot of documentary work as well. And every Friday night I do these live streams to talk a little bit about kind of some of the things I have going on. And I actually have to admit that I have not been super consistent in my live streams over the last couple of weeks because I've been traveling a bunch, shooting a bunch of different projects. I was recently down in Virginia working with my brother, shooting some logging, not vlogging with a V, but just regular logging like trees, lumber stuff, and I shot a video about that recently. Initially, my plan was to test out the GH5 down there, which I did that and posted some of those videos, and yeah, so I'm back in the home studio, which also doubles as my closet and my wife's closet. So that's what I'm working with here, and I've been trying to get a consistent time to do these live streams. I've narrowed it down to Fridays, but I don't necessarily have an exact time because I have a 3-year-old daughter, and between her bedtime and my wife working and doing other things, like, it gets a little bit crazy trying to get a specific time. So initially what I had been doing was 11 p.m. Eastern Friday nights, but that was just too late and it was crushing me because by the time I would get done it would be like 1 in the morning, and I'd have some really great conversations with people on here, which is why I love these live streams, but it just was not practical, and I was super haggard and, you know, not able to set things up where I wanted to because obviously at 11 o'clock everybody else is asleep, and so I had to be kind of elsewhere in the house and suboptimal lighting and not having the wonderful studio ambiance here in the Living Vertical Studios. Anyways, guys, I am super excited to be able to talk to you today, and yeah, I don't know who all is here. Feel free to say hey. Let me know who you are and what you're interested in here. The way I like to do these live streams, I like it to be informal. If there are questions that you guys have about anything, or you want to interject, chime in, I always try to do my best to answer questions and stuff. But you'll notice the title of the live stream is, you know, that no more no more camera reviews. And yeah, I have been doing a lot of camera reviews, and that was never my purpose in starting this channel. In fact, I have always loved cameras in addition to photography, in addition to making movies. Hi, Tony Murphy. First time ever watching a live stream. Oh boy. Well, I hope I can set the bar high for the rest of the live streams that you might watch. Welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I hope you find this somewhat interesting and entertaining. I love cameras, and I think that the love of cameras is different from the love of photography, different from the love of filmmaking and storytelling. And it becomes its own thing, and it certainly became its own thing in my life. And the easiest way to find people and for people to find you is through reviewing cameras on YouTube. At least for me, for whatever reason, that was the thing that always brought me to YouTube, and that's how I found the channels that I enjoy following. So some of the channels that I follow, and you guys may have heard of some of these guys: the Art of Photography, the Angry Photographer. I watch his stuff even though he's insanely dogmatic and critical, and he's not my style of presenter at all. But I enjoy watching, you know, especially as a Fuji shooter. I still do have the X-T2, and more recently, though, I've been more interested in fondling the X100T, especially since if I do have to get rid of the X-T2 to keep the GH5, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here about camera stuff, but this is going to be my Fuji, the only Fuji camera that I will commit to keeping permanently, because the X-T2, I don't know if that's going to work for me. But I found all of the channels that I enjoy following on YouTube, just about, I found through camera reviews. And so to me, that was always kind of a thing that made a lot of sense to say, okay, well, I really want to grow my channel, and I enjoy filmmaking, and a lot of my films and photography, it's based around travel and adventure, and really what got me into photography was, and that would be a cool thing to do a live stream about, maybe to kind of share stories at some point of like how we got into photography and filmmaking and kind of what brought us here, because I think that's interesting. Like everybody has a different story, and briefly, my story, how I started making films and how I started taking photos, was to document a climbing project, a rock climbing project that I did that took me a year, and I climbed every single day with no days off while traveling all around the country. Kind of an arbitrary type of thing, but my goal with that project was to raise awareness of type 1 diabetes, which I've lived with for almost 20 years. I got it when I was 16, and I'm now 34 and change. And, you know, it was wanting to tell a different perspective or show a different perspective of a chronic illness, and I just didn't have money to hire a photographer. I was much younger, well, a few years younger. I didn't have money or know how to hire a filmmaker or employ people professionally, so I said, well, I've always done a little bit of photography in my traveling, and a little bit of, you know, how much harder can it be to add video into that and start doing that myself. And that was always really what got me into doing any kind of storytelling. It was really about sharing stories. But when I kind of got to the point with YouTube where it's like, okay, how do I kind of take what I've been doing on social media and on my blog and grow that, like all that stuff that I did on, you know, my other channels kind of fell flat when I put it on YouTube, because it's very different being on a blog or being anywhere else. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed that documentary. And the funny thing is that movie that I made, my very first foray into any kind of storytelling, that was completely flat. What didn't have any traction until just this past year, when I really started to go on YouTube as its own thing, because I didn't realize that YouTube was a thing beyond just, you know, a place where kind of you would host your video. I thought it was a hosting platform. I never looked at YouTube until I started watching camera reviews and realized that like YouTube is actually its own social media channel with its own ecosystem and its own livelihood and life cycle, and like people that create just for YouTube. Like, duh, right? Like, how did I not know that? And it took me, like, if there's one thing that I regret professionally, it's not being on YouTube from the get-go. I was very dismissive of YouTube. I thought it was, oh, it's just a stupid place for cat videos. Like, why would I go there? And then by the time I figured it out, it was after, you know, it was only very recently, really within the last year, that I figured that out about YouTube. But anyways, it all boiled down to storytelling, and so I've thrown a lot of camera stuff in there because I want to have searchable content. I want to reach people and get people involved and bring them into the community, ultimately with the goal of being able to share stories, both mine and also to talk about the process of storytelling more. And camera reviews, it's weird. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with camera reviews and reviewers, because I will watch camera reviews for cameras that I have no interest in ever buying, like the Sony A9. Like I watched the Angry Photographer review the Sony review. I use that term very loosely. I watched him bag on the Sony A9 just because I wanted to hear his tirade about that. Personally, I don't have any interest in any of the Sony cameras other than the little RX100 cameras. But one of the things that occurred to me as I've been reviewing the XT2 and the G85 by Panasonic and the GH5, and making movies and photographs with those cameras, the thing that occurs to me is that I feel like I always have to spend a lot of time putting disclaimers into those reviews that say, look, I am giving you my perspective, I'm giving you my opinion on how the features are implemented, how useful these features are. And a lot of people expect reviews to be just like bullet point spec sheets and then saying this camera is better because it has this feature. And at the end of the day, it's not that simple. You know, I had the opportunity to, or I have had actually numerous people that are kind of trying to make a decision about a camera that I'm reviewing. And in the comments on YouTube, on one of the videos, we'll go back and forth and we'll talk about like, okay, well, is the GH5 better, or should I get a Sony A7 because, you know, the A7 A7R Mark II or A7S Mark II, whichever, you know, has that great low light performance, better autofocus, bigger sensor, but the GH5 has, you know, better lens ecosystem. Arguably, it has some features like the IBIS that's really good. And at the end of the day, like if you just compare features to features, it's really hard to make a decision, and it all boils down. It's completely subjective. And so there's a point at which camera reviews become very self-serving, and I'll be really honest and say when I make a review of a camera, my thought is like, how can I just be honest about how I found this camera to be without really having any consideration for other people and what they're going to do. I mean, I try to put myself in other people's shoes and say, okay, if I were a wedding photographer, would I want the GH5 as my main camera? Probably not, right? Like that's a fairly easy thing to do, but I'm not a wedding photographer, and there probably are wedding photographers that are like, oh, the GH5 is great, and there's probably a lot that are like, yeah, obviously, duh, I didn't need to watch your video to know that. But all I can do is say, this is what I've been doing, and ultimately, I've kind of gotten to that point where, yeah, I mean, I think I've been at that point for a little bit where I've just been over the reviews of the cameras just because of the fact that, you know, there's not really a whole lot to go over other than to say, look, this has been my experience of using a camera, and at the end of the day, anybody can argue with your experience because your experience is very subjective. It's a very creative thing, and so based on your creative style and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, a camera may or may not work for you. And it's like, to me, that's the thing. Every time I go to do a camera review, it's the preamble. That's the part that I'm really more excited and enthusiastic about, is trying to connect with people and say, look, you're here watching a camera review because you're interested in this piece of gear. Let's talk about how you want to use this camera. Let's talk about what you want to do with it, where you want to take it, where you want it to take you, what you want to accomplish as a result of this, and like that. The bigger picture, I guess, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that just want to hear specs and they want to hear thumbs up or thumbs down, and I really haven't found that there are a lot of bad cameras out there. I mean, there are some cameras that have certain features on them that are poorly designed or that are, you know, lagging behind the rest of the camera. Like, for example, the GH5, you know, you've probably seen a bunch of stuff and, like, you know, the catchy clickbaity titles about, does the autofocus suck on the GH5? The autofocus is awful. Don't buy this. Why I sent back the GH5. And it's like, yeah, the autofocus is not something I would recommend the GH5 for. But at the end of the day, there is room for a whole conversation about, okay, well, why do we think autofocus is the most important thing in the world? And like, what ways could we work around having autofocus? How could we do things in a different way where autofocus isn't the end-all be-all? And the same thing, frankly, goes for, you know, with the XT2. Like, there are limitations that the XT2 has. Doesn't have the flip screen, doesn't have some of the niceties and the bells and whistles that the GH5 and some of the Panasonic cameras have. I've been a very vocal critic of the XT2 for as much as I love it, but also for as much as it has frustrated the hell out of me because it misses those features, and ultimately there are ways to work around everything, and camera reviews, it just gets kind of old. And so, practically speaking, I have found a setup or a system that I am really happy with in the GH5, and so I don't feel like I need to continue reviewing cameras, even though it's nice putting a camera review out there, because every time I publish a video, I'm like, refresh, refresh, refresh. Let's see, are people hitting this? Are people liking it? How is it, you know, being received with my audience, and or how is it building my audience? And every time it's XT2 or GH5 in the title, it's like that number of views every time I refresh it. It's like jump, 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 jump. Whereas like if I make a movie that is something that's a little more personal to me, maybe focus more on a narrative, more on a story, sometimes it's harder to get the response that I want there. But now that I've kind of settled on a system that works for me, I think that, you know, I want to move past the strictly technical discussions of how to, and just talk about some of the, you know, some of the creative process a little bit more, the way it works for me. And I really want to also start digging into, in upcoming videos, basically a balance between editing a few personal mini documentary projects that I have in the works. I've done a couple, the grass fire video that I shot when I was down in Virginia, and then also the scenic route, which I just put up. That was a story. If you haven't watched it already, definitely check that out. It's the last video that I published just yesterday about the climbing mishap, you could say, kind of a suboptimal situation that occurred this past summer when I was in British Columbia with my friend Martin, and we kind of got stranded on the top of a mountain. And I've been kind of teasing that movie for a while, and it's taken me till now to get it out there. But it feels so good to have that done, and to just be able to delete the raw files off my computer. I still have them saved in a hard drive if I need them at any point in the future, but like, just to be done with that and be like, okay, now what? You know, and that's really what got me thinking about, well, now what? You know, like I spent all this time trying different cameras and trying to get to a system that would really give me the maximum amount of flexibility and storytelling. I found that system. I found, you know, something that I'm comfortable with. So now what? And so between working on personal projects and sharing those with you guys, and also I want to start talking about and unpacking a little bit more of the creative side of video editing and shooting and some of that stuff, because a lot of the questions that I've gotten over the past couple of months from people is like, you know, how do you do this or that when you're editing? How do you approach the you know, a concept that you want to make a short documentary about? And there's a lot that I don't know about filmmaking. I'll be perfectly honest about that. I don't have this channel because I'm the greatest at everything. I have this channel, frankly, because it's like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Seth Godin or ever listened to any of his stuff, but he has this catchphrase like free bowling, and basically what it is that on the internet, you know, if you write a bad blog post or you make a bad vlog or a bad social media post, as long as it's not something like, you know, audience, but if you just kind of flop and you make a video that people are like, yawn, they click away, you always can come back and do it again. It's unlimited chances to just do it and get it done and then move on to the next thing. And just free bowling, like, keep in mind that you always have that opportunity to just come back and do it again and do it again, and that's how you get better. And, you know, that's largely the way that what I've used YouTube for, is as a place to exercise my creativity like a muscle and to try to get better at things that I'm not good at. And that's hard, frankly, because like, especially as your community grows and you become conscious of the fact that your community is growing, you want to make people happy. I love getting a pat on the back from somebody who's watched a camera review, gotten useful information, saved money, or made a decision as a result of some information or interaction that I've had with them, and I've been able to give them some information, and I love that. That feels great. And it's harder to get that level, I think, at least for me. Maybe this is just a personal thing, but I feel like it's harder to get that same level of, or to give that same level of value in telling a story, because it's a little bit more nebulous. It's a little more warm and fuzzy, where you want to make somebody feel something in order to get that pat on the back where they felt something from you sharing your experience. Whereas, you know, with a camera review, it's like you can help somebody by giving them concrete information, and you know that like it's formulaic. You can say, this is how, and storytelling certainly can be formulaic too. I mean, look at Casey Neistat, right? But again, that's where I use YouTube for that that area to improve skills that are not, that I'm not super strong on, things that I'm not really well, that I look at and say, I feel intimidated by this skill or this particular thing, so I'm going to practice that more. And so storytelling is, I've kind of been hanging on to the training wheels, I guess, of the easy search engine optimization points, the SEO points on YouTube, by doing camera reviews. And I'm happy that I've done that, and I'm happy that those camera reviews have brought you guys here. And I still love talking about cameras, don't get me wrong, and that's something that I'll do when it's relevant. But I'm excited to now say, okay, like, what's the point of all this? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And on a slightly different note, I mean, maybe it's not that different, this is actually very much related, a documentary project that I am interested in approaching. I've done, some of you guys have seen some of the videos. I mentioned that I have type 1 diabetes. That's a big part of my life. That's what got me into photography, as I mentioned earlier, in one form or another. And it was very traumatic for me when I was 16 years old. I almost died. I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I was in ICU, lost memory for 2 days, completely, lost several days of my life to my recollection. Almost died. I was separate from my parents for a while there too, because I was going to high school in Alaska. So my parents were in the middle of a divorce, and my mom was in Georgia, my dad was in New York. I was in Alaska in the ICU for 2 weeks and living with people that I didn't really know that well. And I just got diagnosed with a chronic illness that was going to change my life. And so that has been a big part of why I do what I do here. But having shared that with you guys, I'll be honest, I just totally lost my train of thought there where I was going. But the bottom line is that documentary project that I wanted to do now, where I am these 18 years down the road, is about sharing stories and telling stories about people who are living in the United States who are struggling to be able to afford their medication and basic medical care. And this is something that seems really relevant, especially after the repeal of Obamacare happened. And I am not a super political. I usually don't get into political discussions just because of the fact that. And I'm not trying to be smug when I say this, but my views about things political are fairly nuanced. And I usually find a decent amount to disagree with and agree with people of every political stripe. And so there's a certain extent to which, the people who are more conservative leaning, who would tend to bag on Obamacare and say, oh, it's the worst thing ever, and you said we could keep our doctors and our insurance, and it just got more expensive and worse. Agreed, understood. It didn't fix everything. It definitely made some stuff worse. However, there was a certain element of truth to the need for that legislation in the first place, because a person like myself, I am, I don't have to take my shirt off and flex for you to show you that I'm in decent shape. I take care of myself. I have taken care of myself and made that my life's work. That's part of what got me into climbing. And part of why I started bringing a camera along with the climbing and the traveling is because I want to have an occupation that is active, kind of like editing videos, because it's so active and it helps me stay fit when I sit at a computer all the time when I'm editing projects. Scott's Wild Camper said, cameras are like tents. You pick the one with the features that you have or that you love the most, then learn to live with the flaws. Totally agreed about that, Scott. But a person like me who takes care of themselves and invests a lot into, trying to stay healthy just because I have a pre-existing condition, that was something that Obamacare did address. And Tony's taken off to go shoot sunrise. You take care, Tony. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again on another one of these live streams. Thank you. Much appreciated. So anyways, there are these issues with social stuff and medicine and healthcare, and I mean, it all ties into photography because, like I said, to me, if I don't have insulin, I can't, live. I can't get out of my house and go out and function and take pictures and travel and do all of that. And so that's a cost that I always have to be bearing in mind with anything that I'm doing creatively. And I'm kind of at a point where, you know, I've made a lot of media photos, and, you know, if you follow any of my social media accounts, where I have in the past spent a lot of time talking about positive, like empowering messages for other people who are living with these conditions, to change the way the public sees it, to be like, hey, we're not all weak, we're not all 400 pounds overweight, and even some of the people who are, you know, morbidly obese, you know, there's more to these situations that meet the eye, and we should try to understand where people are coming from rather than just judge people based on the label that they get from a medical condition and say, you know, label people as deserving something. It's like, oh, it's your fault because you ate too much sugar or whatever. But I've done a lot of that already, and what I want to do now is start to look a little bit more in depth at, you know, people who are doing everything right, doing their best, and have made a lot of effort and are struggling now to afford, you know, medication. And this is not medication that is like brand new cutting edge stuff. Like insulin is a drug that was developed in the 1920s. The patent for insulin was sold by the guys who developed it for $1, so that we would not be in a situation that we're in now where, hey, King Yuzi, good to see you here. How are you on this fine Friday evening? Glad you made it. You know, the drug that I take that now literally costs $400 for a month's supply, the patent for that stuff was sold for $1 in 1920 something. And because of, you know, tweaking and adjustments, and, you know, they have improved on that, but to say, look, guys, $400 is really excessive, because for me to buy, you know, I take 2 types of insulin, that's like $800 a month. That's practically a mortgage payment just to, like, be able to wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night without dying. I'm paying $800 a month just to live. And, you know, if somebody said, look, we can't help you with it, you know, beyond maybe a couple $100, like, I want to be able to pay for the things, the resources that I use and all that. And I mean, this is a very complex discussion. I'm trying not to go off the rails on it. But, you know, I want to be able to be in a marketplace or in a situation where I am able to contribute to supporting myself, where I can give something in exchange for the insulin and the drugs that I need to live in order to be healthy, to work, to contribute, to be able to work enough, to make enough money to be able to actually pay taxes. I need insulin to be able to do that. And so the current situation, and really, for a lot of people, Obamacare didn't change this, but the situation was that it's like, okay, either you can make a shit pile of money and then, you know, buy good insurance, but if you're somewhere between completely destitute and completely loaded, and you're just in the middle here, you don't really make enough money to actually buy good enough insurance. And for a lot of people, good enough insurance, it's like, whatever, when you're not relying on that insurance to acquire drugs every month in order to live. And so for a lot of people, good enough insurance is good enough. For me, good enough insurance is not good enough, because I actually use that insurance every month, which to my mind makes it less of insurance, right? Because insurance is something that's a safety net. That's like something you rely on when you slip and fall. Like, I slipped and fell genetically 18 years ago, and I haven't gotten up from it. I still have diabetes. I'm going to have diabetes for the rest of my life because, you know, I got handed some bad genes, not because I ate too much sugar as a kid. And for what it's worth, since I noticed that you guys are hanging around to have this conversation with me, I actually eat 0 sugar. So I eat 0 carbs. My diet is fat and protein. I eat a ketogenic diet, which helps me stay in shape, gives me lots of energy, and keeps my brain relatively sharp, and it keeps my body from completely going into a decayed and vegetative state while I'm sitting here at the computer, which I do, admittedly, a lot of time while I'm editing and making, you know, these videos and stuff and talking to you guys. So, you know, it's a fairly complex thing, and I feel like I have the opportunity to start, unpacking some of these stories, sharing some of these stories as a documentarian or documentary filmmaker and or photographer. And so what I'm trying to decide at this point is, like, this is a very personal project to me because part of this is my story. It's like I went from being somebody who was a climber who had industry sponsors, who was working with the pharmaceutical industry to support the work that I was doing to try to, inspire other people, to realizing that, inspire other people to realizing that they don't have to be limited just because they have a medical condition. And I came from that to realizing at one point that I couldn't in good conscience cash a check from the pharmaceutical industry when what I was telling people was kind of moot, because so many people were having a hard time affording their medication. Because it's great to be positive about your condition if you have the tools you need to use positively in connection to your condition and go make something of yourself with that, which is what I had. And I'm thankful for that. And currently I still have enough insulin stockpiled, and I'm in Massachusetts, which has a pretty good system, all things notwithstanding, even despite the repeal of Obamacare that just is moving forward over the last couple of days. But I've been really fortunate. But there's so many people in the States, and like, we always think of it as like, oh, we're America, we police the world, we have huge military, we have, big presence, we're super prosperous, nobody, that kind of stuff, people have what they need. But no, the truth is there's a lot of people here that don't have that. And so coming to that realization was a big aha moment for me, where I was just like, the good that I'm accomplishing by inspiring people is not good enough to justify the contribution that I'm making to the status quo, which is really screwing a lot of people over. And King Yuzi just mentioned that, the single-payer healthcare system that they have in the UK. And I have friends in Scotland, and again, there's a lot of, pros and cons to this, different ways one could look at it. I am not an economist. I have worked in medical research. I have worked in the pharmaceutical industry, in partnership with pharmaceutical, and like, I understand that this stuff is super, super complex. And my point with this individual rant here, and indeed the further documentary project that I am pondering moving forward with, it's not to do like a Michael Moore style tinfoil hat gotcha piece where we all put on our colanders on our head and go out with torches and pitchforks. And because I know a lot of the people that work in the industry, and there are very good people that are out there in the industry that are part of the problem. And there are people even within the community of people who live with medical conditions that are part of the problem. Like, we all have some role to play. What I honestly think, and this may be incredibly idealistic and like artsy fartsy of me to say, but I really believe that the power of telling a story lies in being able to connect people with completely differing perspectives, people who are completely unaware of the situation that other people live in. And that has been my experience of people in research who, have no idea what it's like to worry about their child. Computer monitor turned off there. Who have no idea what it's like to have their child, or to worry about if your child is going to survive the night, because their blood sugar could crash out in the middle of the night and they could wake up dead in bed. Like, that's a real thing that parents of kids with type 1, they worry about that. I'm fortunate because I'm the one with type 1, not my daughter, thank God. Like, at this point, like, my daughter doesn't have it. But like, I don't mind taking it on the chin even for myself nearly as much as, like, I would be devastated if my little 3-year-old daughter, and if you've watched some of my camera reviews, you've certainly seen pictures of her. I got some Instax pictures of her. My wife got me. That's something I could do a camera review about, because that would be sort of relevant. This is me and my little girl Lilo, and obviously I would be crushed if I had to watch my child deal with a chronic illness like that. And the people that are making these prices and that are setting keeping the system the way it is, a lot of them, they just are insulated from that stuff. And being able to tell a story in a way that reaches people, that educates people, and not in a preachy sort of, well, this is what you need to know, and here are the facts about this, blah, 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 and that, the other thing, like being able to reach people in a way where they connect genuinely to the experience that another person has. That is, to me, like really what I have my sights set on, and through this channel and in just all the work that I'm doing. You know, storytelling matters. It matters so much. And I know that, like, one of the reasons I love watching The Art of Photography, Ted Forbes, there was a time when I kind of thought he was a little bit like full of it, because, you know, he didn't really, I never really saw a bunch of his work, and even the work of his that I saw at the time, I was just kind of like, okay, it's all right, but, like, you know, why does this guy have, you know, 250,000 subs on his channel? But the thing that I've really grown to appreciate so much from what he does is really bringing things back to the why of, like, why is this stuff important? And I've told this story on a handful of my videos and vlogs. Some of you may remember I was living in a trailer, driving around the country, a little tiny trailer with my family last year, and it was about this time, close to this time, or almost at 1 year anniversary. My friend Chris Pittman, we were down with him in Las Vegas, Nevada, and my car got hit in a hit-and-run accident, and so while I was waiting for the insurance to fix my car, because we couldn't take the trailer anywhere without the car because it was all busted up, we wound up having to stay with him and kind of impose on him in Las Vegas, and it was starting to get hot, kind of unpleasant. I wanted to be out in California, wanted to be climbing, wanted to be seeing these majestic scenes in Yosemite, and like living up to these expectations that I had. And meanwhile, he had been going through some really devastating mental struggles and some really dark places with depression. And in the time that I was there, because I was all like in my own head, and I was butthurt because, like, oh man, my car got smashed up, this sucks so much, what am I doing, I can't believe I'm here, I'm stuck in Las Vegas, like in a fairly urban, you know, kind of suburbs of Vegas. We were at Summerlin area, which is nice as Vegas goes, but, you know, I felt really stuck there. I wasn't out living the dream and shooting exciting stuff for my YouTube channel and building my credibility as a photographer. So I would just go out with my camera. I had some film that I had developed, or I had a film camera that I was shooting with, and I had some other, my little Fuji camera, and I would just go out and shoot every single day just to try to do something to feel productive, like I was accomplishing something. And so, to make a long story excruciating, shortly after we left, I, you know, heard through the grapevine, and I had a fairly, I was fairly certain, because my friend had been in and out of mental hospitals and other stuff. Like, there were people who were trying desperately to get him the help that he needed, and it just, I don't know, it wasn't enough. But he took his own life. And, you know, that was something that I was driving through Oregon with my daughter, and she's in the back seat of the car, and like my friend Rob calls me up and says, hey man, I got some bad news, and he told me, he said, you know, Chris took his life last night. And there was part of me that wasn't surprised, but there was also part of me that was just like, this was somebody who had been such a close friend, and somebody that I had been on so many adventures with, and had been so generous and such a big part of my life, and had supported so much of the things that I had done, including, you know, the desire to be on the road. And he was always letting us park our trailer, because we used to fly out of Las Vegas a whole bunch. And so it stunned me, and so the point that I'm getting to, and I'm sorry I'm not doing a great job of telling this story, because it's kind of hard, because I struggle with the enormity of what happened, not in a like choking back tears sort of way, but it just makes me very sad, because it's one of those things that every time I think about it, I remember that he's gone, and it's just like, oh shit, that's right, he's gone. because like you get close to a person and they become part of your life, and like, you know, you just don't think about a world without this person because they're your friend. They're somebody that's always been there. That's such a huge part of your life, and you know, so I still struggle with that. But the bottom line of what I'm getting to here, and I'm looking for the, well, okay, this is the photograph that I have. It was one of my film photos, and I have some better pictures actually too from the that I took when we were out there with the digital camera with the Fuji. But it was the idea of storytelling being important, which is the rambling point that I'm getting to here. This is the last photograph of my friend Chris. We were all at the playground together, you know, and that was the last, like, we had a really good conversation. You know, we talked about ways that he could maybe, because my answer to everything is always like, okay, like if you have a problem, try to talk about your problem and help other people who have that problem, and that'll help you with that problem. Because I've dealt with depression. You know, depression is sort of a co-diagnosis with a lot of chronic illness, because you know you're doing the same thing constantly. It's expensive, and you're not, oftentimes, you know, you do the same thing over and over and you get different results, and it's super frustrating. You're watching your body deteriorate. You know, your blood sugar's out of control. Super frustrating sometimes, and it just happens no matter how hard you try. So having had some experience with depression personally, that was always my answer, and I felt like we had kind of a breakthrough. We were at the playground, you know, on the swings with my daughter and my wife and his sister who'd come into town to visit, and but it was only 6 months after he had passed away that I found that photo, because it was on a roll of film that I got developed. And you know, it's just, if I hadn't felt the compulsion to take those pictures, and if I hadn't been pressed to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to make something today because I'm depressed, because I'm feeling sorry for myself, because I'm in my own head, but I'm going to just make something today, you know, I wouldn't have those pictures that are the last, you know, and like how much worse would I have felt, you know, hearing that news, to know that like I was this close. Like, I'm a photographer with a camera who was staying with one of my best friends who took his own life, but I didn't think to take his picture the last time I saw him because, what the hell, you know, I'm just like, I'm too worried about going out to Yosemite and getting like the great spectacular landscapes that have been there for however many, you know, tens of thousands of years, and that are going to be there for however many more. But I missed the opportunity to, you know, capture my friend while he was still alive, who's gone and deceased now. Steve M asks if I am sitting in a closet. Yes, I am sitting in a closet. I'm actually sitting in the Living Vertical studio, which is a closet. And believe it or not, on a much lighter note, one of the benefits of having a makeshift studio that's like this is fantastic sound treatment. I used to do, I mean, I still am capable of doing professional audio mixing, and specifically podcast production. That was my last full-time gig, was doing podcast production and audio work, and I did it all right here, and it was like, nobody knew. Like, it was a very carefully guarded secret, because, you know, I didn't want people to realize that, you know, I was sitting in a closet. And actually, let me show you my, I don't want to move the phone, but let me see if I can't move it and reach it. Actually, I bet I can move it a little bit so that you can kind of see. It's the Amazon box. Oh boy, I have an interloper here. My daughter's coming in to say hey. Trying not to rip the whole studio apart, but I'm going to show you guys. Like my deepest, darkest secret. And my daughter is going to probably come in and interrupt everything, and it'll be kind of a fun little bit of chaos here. All right, this is the Amazon box that my microphone. I have a Rode Procaster, which is what I use, and this is the. has now become my studio, my audio, my audio studio. So, yeah, that's one of the things that has inspired me to make movies. 1 second, sweetie. Daddy's talking to his friends here. Okay, you wanna come and say hi?
Yes, I do want to come and say hi.
Now, Steve, when you're talking about having it and hiding it, are you referring to, and I'm not being facetious here, are you referring to like closet production stuff, or are we talking about depression? Just so we're on the same page. Hey, we're being serious here, sweetie. This one here has been a big source of support. Gotcha. Yeah, it's a weird thing, you know. It's this crippling, debilitating thing that you live with, and you have to kind of make something out of it. And I don't know if that has brought you guys into creative pursuits, or whether it's just the people who are attracted to creative pursuits tend to have depression. But, you know, for me, the creative side of stuff has helped me a lot to, like, use that depression, use the negative stuff, and then make a thing out of it, even if it's not directly related, you know, to be able to have that outlet to where I feel like I'm doing something. It's like I may be losing the war, but I'm still at least, you know, on the field, and I'm still, you know, loading up my musket. Even if I am going out there against a howitzer, I do have the opportunity to load up the ball and musket and go out there and make an effort, even if I'm getting destroyed on many days. And Lilo, sweetie, no, okay?
My bunsy.
I know, you're my little bunsy. I love you, okay? Can you go find Mommy?
I can't understand you.
Okay, so if you're going to sit here, you have to be quiet, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, sweetie. Or you can talk if you have something that you'd like to share.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you know, so you have to figure out a strategy to deal with things. And I know on some days, you know, the YouTube thing, it's hard to deal with, where it's depressing to the point where it's like, how do I make a video? You just feel so, oh no, she's not quiet. She's a Fuji shooter. Definitely Fuji. Yeah, she's learned that much from me. Actually, Lila, why don't you get your camera? Go get your camera.
But my camera's downstairs.
Go downstairs and get your camera so you can show my friends. Yeah, she's actually right now she's a Fisher Price shooter right now, but she is. My goal is to get her shooting film, just to start with, because and I think that was actually technically the first picture that she ever took was with the Instax camera. So no, sweetie. She wants to do a live on-air guitar performance, and you don't want to hear that. And if you do, I don't. I actually have the first picture that she took, and where is it? All right. Oh, you know what? The first picture that she took, though, it was with the Instax, the Fuji Instax camera. I don't actually have it in this particular stack, though, unfortunately. And that's another thing, kind of back to the importance of just, you know, making stuff and telling stories, is that, you know, I've looked back on a lot of the experiences and just getting to re-watch my daughter grow up by looking at, you know, the film shots that I've gotten developed and stuff like that is, yeah, Fisher, that's true. Steve says, great camera by Fisher Price, not a whole lot of rolling shutter. Fisher Price got it right, and if only they would put that same technology into the Sony and the Fuji cameras. Lilo, sweetheart, no. She's got a Minnie Mouse doll that is, I think there's some sort of copyright infringement if I have my daughter's Minnie Mouse doll on the live stream. I think that technically Disney could not sue for copyright infringement. They would just take any monetization off of this video, and they would get that because of it. But Oh, okay, yeah, Digital Rev. The cheap camera challenge with the Fisher Price. That's interesting. The Fisher Price camera that my daughter has actually is not a working camera. It's the although I do intend to get her a functioning camera, or even just give her my. I have a Nikon. Well, I have a couple of film cameras that I shoot with. I have a Nikon FE2, and this thing is pretty solidly built. Yeah, Canon's 4K. I had somebody ask me to go in a completely different direction from ye olde film camera. Yeah, somebody was asking me about the 5D Mark IV and how that stacks up against the GH5, and I was just like, no idea. Haven't really shot much with anything by Canon. Shot a bunch with Nikon back in the day, but that was my thing. Yeah, I'll show you my favorite. I had a medium format film camera at one point, but it was a little bit too much for me. These are the ones. I have a Rolly 35 too. This is a Instamatic or Himatic F by Minolta, and this thing is real nice. I enjoy shooting with this and the Rolly 35. I got color in the Rolly, and this one is black and white. Oh no! So Steve M wants me to convince him on the GH5. You're trying to make me go back on my word, and you're taking advantage of the fact that I love talking about cameras. Okay, so Steve, what are you shooting with currently, and what is your what is it that you want to get out of a new camera? Because despite what some people commenters accuse me of being a shill for affiliate revenue, I do. Well, okay. So to go back a little bit, first, why no more reviews is because I found the camera that I don't review cameras to review cameras. I review cameras to find the camera that is gonna enable me to tell stories in the way that I want to, and that has been a laborious process that landed me on the GH5, and now I have that camera that is gonna enable me to do that. So that's why no more camera reviews, and frankly, the majority of each camera review wound up being a disclaimer about camera reviews and how personal and subjective camera reviews are, because the things that I look at as desirable in a camera, another person might validly see as being completely a deal breaker. So there's a certain extent to which a camera review is no better than the reviewer. Not strictly even for matters of integrity or honesty, but just in terms of use and what their opinions are going to be molded and shaped by. And a combination of that nuance with the fact that I found the system that works for me. And basically, the GH5 does everything for me that the Fuji X-T2 does in terms of stills. It does obviously way more in terms of video, and so that's the issue. So small business, music videos, etc., A6500, XT20, or GH5. If video is your primary thing, I would say that, and again, I love the Fuji cameras. You currently shoot video with your X Pro 2. Okay. So, if you currently shoot video with the X Pro 2, any of those cameras are going to be a step up. I think that there's a certain extent to which there is, the Fuji cameras make beautiful video. That's definitely not the issue. Usability is a big thing that I hit hard in my reviews, because features don't mean anything without usability. So Sony cameras have great features, but oftentimes your ability to use those features are limited by the user interface and the way the camera is put together, the way it is laid out. So that's one reason why I don't like Sony's cameras, despite the fact that they do some things really well, and their battery life is abysmal. The Fuji's battery life is also not great, and that's one thing that seems very small, but the GH5, like, I had one battery and I shot all day on one battery, stills, video, the whole nine. So Steve, if you don't like the X-T2's 4K crop, you know, to me, anybody who is doing video, you know, based on my experience and my use, I feel like the GH5 is head and shoulders above kind of everybody else out there within that price range. So one may make the argument that the A9 by Sony with a larger sensor is better in some ways. I haven't really seen enough of the video to be able to say whether it is, and I am not certainly going to invest in that camera to test it because I'm happy with, and I've settled on the GH5 myself. GH5 4K is not cropped at all. You can implement a crop if you want it, but it is not cropped. So it's very subjective for you know, different people, but as much as I love the quality, even with the crop out of the X-T2, I personally don't have a huge issue with it because it's not that big of a thing to me. But the stabilization, like King Yuzi, like you're saying, the stabilization is huge, and I think that if I shot primarily on a tripod, so you know, Steve, if you're coming from the X Pro 2, which is on, you know, that doesn't have stabilization, so the X-T20 versus the X Pro 2, you know, it's going to be fairly familiar in terms of the way that it's going to feel shooting it. What I would say is that if you take the time to learn the touchscreen and the menu system on the Sony, on the GH5, it takes about 2 weeks of consistent shooting on it, but once you learn it, it is incredibly responsive without being interventive. So with the Fuji, like, changing different settings requires intervention that is, you know, requires you to start and stop and more fiddling. But in short, the Panasonic, you can get those same changes implemented almost immediately with much less fiddling, and it becomes very, very, very intuitive. At least that was my experience of it. And it's just very, very well calibrated to shooting video. So it would be really hard for me to recommend unstabilized. So okay, Steve, you have all the different cameras from, you know, the Canons, the different Mark all the way from the Mark II and the GH3 and 4. The big thing is, I think, a combination of the following: a combination of the in-body image stabilization combined with the touch focusing, and again, that's not, the touch focusing isn't a new thing, but the in-body image stabilization on top of everything else, on top of the battery life, on top of not overheating, on top of being able to record an hour of 4K, no sweat, on top of being able to go back at just a flip of a switch with the proper shutter speeds and everything from 180 frames per second full HD to cinema 4K at 24 frames per second to 60p 4K, you know, at 120th of a second or whatnot. Like, being able to interchange between all that stuff so smoothly and so seamlessly, it is really, really huge. And King Yuzi shooting with a shoulder rig and being able to do more of that stuff handheld, that totally makes sense. I've never used a shoulder rig like that, so I can't say that I have experienced that benefit myself, but I've always kind of been forced into handheld, and so for me it's more of like a tripod thing. So taming the image, because the GH cameras, the GH4, as Steve mentioned specifically, was over sharp. I can see that being a thing. Definitely grading the image out of the Panasonic is a little bit challenging. but at the same time, you know, unsharpening it a little, adding a little bit of grain, to me, you know, I haven't found it to be something that, and again, a lot of this is personal taste, but I haven't found it to be something where I'm like, you know, it's really problematic. Maybe I shouldn't do that, because by extension, the Fuji video, you know, you're getting log, or you're not getting log profiles, and so everything is baked in, and you're getting film simulations that are really pretty in stills when you can adjust and fine tune some of the highlights and shadows, but in video, you know, you're stuck with really contrasty looking footage that is pretty tough to grade if it's not just like perfectly lit in camera. And King Yuzi says just shoot flat image. I'm assuming you mean flat image in Panasonic, because flat image, you can only go so flat with the Fujis, which is another thing that I have, another reason why I've, you know, I'm opting away from I'm opting away from the Fuji system. Steve says, I like the A6500, but I hate the camera overall. That's the whole thing with Sony. You know, they make cameras with awesome features, but then they implement them in a really jingus way that is really hard to use. And like the battery life, the overheating, I've heard, I haven't used the A6500, but I've heard that the IBIS is not so great. And I heard also, I believe, that the rolling shutter was a bit of an issue for some people. With the GH5, you know, the rolling shutter is virtually non-existent, and I would rather put the work into something that I can mitigate, like I can change the way that I grade in order to deal with an overly sharp image. Whereas if I'm, you know, talking about something like you know, a camera that doesn't have IBIS, or that has really bad rolling shutter, or what have you, those are things that it goes beyond just working around them. That goes to like throwing it away and putting it in the trash. Now, Steve, as you mentioned, autofocus on the 6500. I said in my review, even as much as, you know, I make very clear that I do not value autofocus personally to the point where I would say I would buy a camera for that. I mean, it would be great if the GH5 would get their autofocus up to speed, because then vlogging type videos would be easier. But I mean, even if they don't, using the mobile app for that, for the amount that I need that you know, to be in front of the camera most of the time, it's pretty reasonable, because the big thing is at least I can frame my shot and see myself, whereas with the Fuji, I could not see myself and even frame myself, let alone focus myself. And now, of course, on the Fuji, the autofocus is fixed to where the autofocus is good, and I trust it to track me, but I don't know how my shot is framed up, and I don't want to be like, you know, over here in the frame and then have to go back and crop or shoot differently. And, you know, that's just, especially when you're dealing with like a vlog type thing where, you know, you have to struggle to get it up emotionally to be like, okay, I'm going to go out and make this video that, you know, isn't spectacular looking, but you do anyway. So to me, the GH5, the combination of the IBIS, the flip screen, the touch screen, certainly the dual cards are nice. Being able to monitor audio on the camera, again, these are like kind of things that aren't the big features that, and the 10-bit is easier to grade by a long way than the Fuji video for sure. Certainly Sony, they have like the I get, what is it, the log profile and stuff like that. But you know, it's the little things that are kind of built in that work really well together, and the custom shooting modes. Everything is pretty straightforward on the GH5 in terms of the menu system. King Yuzi, that's an interesting idea, having somebody else dealing with the focus remotely. That's definitely, I'm not sure if the camera, if you could still look through the camera, or how like the monitoring of the camera would go, although you could probably, you know, be, depending on how you set it up, like if that person controlling the focus was also, you know, responsible for monitoring the shot and you were just kind of, you know, elsewhere, that could be a really interesting opportunity. But it's a lot of little stuff, really, I think, that the GH5 does well that won me over. Yeah, that would be a really cool thing to experiment with, for sure. And I mean, frankly, I'm still scratching the surface, and that's honestly one of the reasons why, I mean, of course, I got sucked back into sort of camera review discussion here in this conversation now, but frankly, one of the reasons why I want to kind of move past camera reviews is because I want to start really digging into the camera. It's such a powerful tool that can do so much. You know, I don't want to just kind of do cursory, superficial overviews of these things and then go on down the road. Like, I want to be able to say, get out there and really dig into it. And Steve, yeah, the XT2 versus the XT20, I don't think you would see much. I wouldn't expect to see much difference in it. And frankly, like, you know, that's something that I've wondered about a lot with the XT2 and the XT20. And when I was in my diehard Fuji phase, where I was like, you know, ride or die with the XT2, my thought was that because they had so much overlap between the XT2 and the XT20, was that you know, they were going to have to do some major expansion within the XT2 via firmware in order to keep it flagship and make it worth people spending extra money on it versus the XT20, since the XT20 is almost there's like one or two features. I think it even has weather sealing, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't it? But the XT20, don't mind me just doing some drugs on the air here. Yeah, the XT20 has a lot of meat on the bone relative to the XT2. So I was yeah, well, after 20 years, it gets to be kind of casual. Some people get really, like, self-conscious in public, and I've made it a point to be very, you know, like, I don't intentionally want to make people uncomfortable, but you know, I take my insulin anywhere I need it. I'd love to not need it, but yeah. Yeah, for the money, the XT20, to talk about real important things that matter here, the XT20 is really a very good deal. And in hindsight, you know, I might have gone that direction over the XT2. If I do need to get rid of the XT2, that's an option. I'm very curious to see what the XT3, and this is not even necessarily from a standpoint of desire, but just genuinely curious of what the answer to this question is like, you know, looking at what is happening between what Sony is doing, and again, lots of problems with Sony's, right? Like, everybody has reasons why they hate Sony, myself included, but they have a lot of meat on the bone as well. There's a lot of people who bear with the shortcomings and the limitations in order to keep shooting with them, because they have some really amazing features and performance areas. And obviously Panasonic with the GH5, and it's like Fuji is kind of getting, like, elbowed out of this unless they do something fairly major with their, either via firmware to the XT2 or, you know, in releasing another camera that really takes seriously. Because I felt a little bit put off at, and part of this was, you know, I didn't realize how much some of those little things like the flip screen would really make a difference when you're shooting a lot of video. And it turns out, yeah, it does make a big difference. GH6 will have built-in parachute and plasma cannon. That's another thing I'm curious about too. You know, is what is next? You know, like, where do these cameras go from here? Because you know, just making like 8K or 6K pictures, like, to me, that's kind of like, I know that there are some people that would buy for that, but I can't see that being really worth it. And I think that, you know, for Panasonic, some sort of a stacked micro four thirds sensor similar to what Sony has for the 1-inch sensor that's in the RX100 line, that performs amazingly even at low light. I mean, it punches well above its weight with that tiny little stacked sensor. If they do something similar with a micro four thirds sensor, then it should be performing even better than this sensor is. It should be like APS-C level, or maybe even, you know, a cut above you know, if they implement that technology well, or, you know, they maybe having to get a bigger sensor. And you know, if GH5 winds up, I mean, I guess they would probably introduce a different camera line if they went away from Micro Four Thirds sensors and went to a bigger sensor. But that seems to be the only place for them to go. Replicating film perfectly would be awesome. I haven't shot enough. I don't know enough about film to be able to opine too much about that, but I would say that, you know, the Fuji, everybody says Fuji is really close to film. So there's that. But for the Fuji, the next place to go is kind of, it's like Fuji got the sensor right, and now they need to get the features right. Panasonic got the features right, now they need to get the sensor right. And I mean, still, the sensor on the GH5 is really good. And I missed those two comments, so I got to go back and fish those out. I see. The point in 400 megs. Yeah, so for GH5, 400 megs is probably going to be a little bit too much. I think right now at 150, that's as much as I would want to do. I can't see myself opting for 400 megs because those, like the files coming out of the GH5 as it is now, those files are like monstrous. And they definitely do take longer to transcode and import and mess around with, not in a good way. So they definitely have impacted my workflow from that standpoint. But yeah, 400 megs, I don't think everybody needs that, but certainly to have that as an option, I can see where that would be a nice option. And you could say the same thing about 10-bit color, in-body log, and all the rest of that. But for me, the things that I found that were the most impactful were the IBIS, the touchscreen, the custom shooting modes, and being able to monitor audio on board. And the raw files for the photos, let me see, I think I have some of those in here. I'm going to look on my computer, my computing device, really quickly. And let me go through all my 23.9 megabytes, 23.8, 24, basically 24 megs is what you're looking at for the raw files. And Fuji, what were those stills? Oh, bugger, where did that go? Delete that. Must have gotten rid of those. The Fujis were a little bit bigger. They're raw files, which I can look that up here. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting. All that to say, it'll be interesting to see where things go from here with all of the different cameras, you know, because like I don't really know. Yeah, it's the same size as the Fuji files, the RAWs are. Scott's Wild Camper says, this is my first live chat. It's surreal here in Scotland. It's 3:20 a.m. and I'm watching a man in a closet talk about cameras. I love your channel. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate your candor and your input. I remember from your first comments back in the day. Wow, I'm getting guys from the UK in here. That's commitment. I appreciate you guys. That's rad. I'm glad that you guys are here. I remember Scott's first comments, I think it was back when I was still living in the trailer. London, all right, London checking in. Hi, human being. I like the username and stoked that you're checking us out over in London. That's one of the reasons why I love these live chats. It's like you get a lot more opportunity to interact with people and find out where people are from and what they're up to. And I love answering questions, you know, because a lot of the time I can kind of ramble on about a lot of different things, but I like talking about, like answering questions and kind of kicking the can down the road about cameras and kind of figuring out what could be better there. you know, I love storytelling too. That's a big part of it. But ultimately, the people ask questions. Those are the ones that get answered. So I've gotten a few people that give me a little bit of, you know, mention that they were kind of more interested in the storytelling on the channel than the camera reviews. And it's like, well, I do a little bit of both. I think that my goal is to do enough storytelling to lend credibility to when I do talk about cameras. King Uzi, yes, I have visited the UK. I visited Scotland right in 2013, actually. So I was on my way back home. I had just climbed Kilimanjaro on my way back home from Africa, and what happened was I actually got sponsored to do the climb in Africa. I loved Scotland, and it wasn't that rainy while we were there. I loved Scotland because I have some friends. So I used to be a rock climbing and canyoneering guide when I was living in Utah. And when I was guiding there, my best clients were a Scottish couple from Falkirk that came over, and we just really hit it off. I had been having a really lousy, like, couple of weeks guiding, just personal stuff and work just wasn't going well, and I was like, I needed to have a good day. Like, that was one of those days where I was like, this cannot be people that are just like, you know, boring people that you have to spend a day with. And like, it's fun being in a canyon and playing with ropes and climbing and going rappelling all day, you know, for your job. But at the same time, it's like, once you do it 150 times, it gets kind of old. And I needed to have a good day that day. And this couple was amazing. They were so cool. We stayed in touch. They're on my Patreon as their supporters now. Like, they've really been very instrumental in supporting a lot of the work that I've done over the years too. And so yeah, I went to climb Kilimanjaro, and I had to come back to the States. So I told the people flying me, I was like, look, can you put my ticket through Scotland instead of, I'll get my own flight from Scotland back to the States if you just kind of drop me off in Scotland. So I went and I stayed with them for a little while, and it was raining for some of the time, but the most memorable part of it was the haggis. The haggis, and I just love Tesco. Tesco and haggis. There was just the haggis and the cheese was so amazing. I fell in love with it. I've been wanting to go back. We spent some time up in Aviemore, hanging out up there, and there was a I guess it was Emirates. They left my bag in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So I got to Scotland, and I had like the clothes I was wearing, and we were gonna go to Aviemore and go play up in the mountains or whatever. So I did try fish and chips. But I like the fish. The chips, I was a little bit less, because I don't really eat a lot of carbs and potatoes, and so that was the other thing. Iron Brew. I don't know, do you have Iron Brew where you're at? I don't know if it's like a full UK thing, or if it's like just a Scottish thing, or if it's just like even a Falkirk thing. I know there are some sodas here in the States that are just specific to Massachusetts. So there's like what the hell is this stuff called? Moxie. Yeah, made from girders. That's right. Iron Brew. That stuff is amazing. I love that. That was like, I was big fan of the Iron Brew. Super memorable. And then, of course, buying a whole new wardrobe of clothes up in Aviemore, which they happen to have stuff on sale, and it worked out okay. I still have an Aviemore shirt in here somewhere. Steve says, I backcountry skied most of the Ruby Mountains. Very cool. I used to ski Utah a lot. That's awesome. I've only skied really on the East Coast. I've been through Elko a bunch, and Lamoille Canyon. I know there's good climbing. Yeah, I knew what you meant there, King Uzi, about the girders. Yeah, there's good climbing in Lamoille Canyon. I think if that's the way it's pronounced. And I'm actually, part of the thing too is that like what I'm doing with my YouTube channel, it could take off into something that is sustainable for me, but I've had a really hard time marketing myself and getting work, creative work, that's consistent. And so I'm considering, like I was doing logging with my brother in Virginia, not just to test the GH5, like that's actually something, for income, because it's good hard work outside. And, I like working with my brother, I like spending time with him, but then limb oil, really interesting. I guess I out lamb oil canyon. I out culturally tried. I tried to be cultural and Lamoille. Tried to be a little, put a little flair in there, but that's what you get for trying. Yeah, there's really good climbing down there, and so I am considering the possibility of winding up in that area in the Southwest. Where are you, relatively speaking, Steve? It sounds like you're somewhere in the Southwest, or you were. Because Vegas would be an interesting place to live, because the airline there, my wife could, because she works for an airline, so she could fly out of Vegas, and I would potentially be able to get work in Vegas as a shackle monkey, basically as a climber, knowing my way around rigging and having, comfort at heights. I could actually do rigging for lighting, and even possibly do camera work within rope systems. So kind of like being up above stages on ropes, and doing camera work for productions that are happening in Vegas. And I know a couple guys that are climbers that are out there in Vegas doing that right now. And it's tough work, and it's tough to get in, but once you get in, Steve, you grew up in Elko. Very cool. Now, if I'm trying to think right off the top of my head, where is Elko? Because I've driven past that so many times. I'm just trying to place it exactly on the map so that I can picture where I would have been going to and from when I saw that. And let me just zoom out here on Google Maps. Got it. Okay. Interesting story. I drove through or past Elko. So I don't know if you're familiar with City of Rocks National Reserve. It's kind of a little bit north in Idaho, in the pan of Idaho. Fantastic rock climbing. Fantastic. So user-friendly. I did a couple of videos last summer from out there when we tried taking my then 2-year-old daughter rock climbing for the first time. Didn't work out super well with her. Past Boise, no, it's not quite. It's not quite up to Boise. It's like just a little bit. It's like an hour south of Twin Falls. Northman, I got to check them out. I haven't heard of Northman, but I will look at that. Thank you for that suggestion, King Yuzi. I always like good inspiration. Yes, Steve, just a little bit south of Twin Falls. It's City of Rocks National Reserve. And it's a state thing. Have I ever seen a climber with a kilt on? It could be chilly on the fellas, that's for sure. Yeah, there's a dude named Plaid Man, he calls himself. He's on Facebook. He's a little older than I am, but he does a lot of big wall climbing, and he's way into the whole kilt thing. I've seen more hikers with kilts, though, and I think the ventilation there would come in a little bit more handy than climbing with a kilt, because I think the harness could kind of make the kilt a little problematic. But it's not people. I haven't seen people climb naked personally. I've seen pictures of people climbing naked. Less chafing with a kilt. Yeah, you're probably right about that. But yeah, City of Rocks in Idaho. I was driving from City of Rocks, Idaho to Reno, and there's a big stretch of there that goes right past Elko, and just a whole bunch of nothing on Route 80. Actually, no, I wasn't. Where was I? I was driving to Yosemite. So I wasn't going to Reno, because Reno, that would have taken me along the highway. I was going near Elko and just down like back roads through Nevada, through the Humboldt Toyabe National Forest there. And long story, excruciating. Could have been much worse, but it was one of those like, oh, we have enough gas to make it to the next. It can't be that far away. And it was literally that far away, and like we ran out of gas pulling up to the gas pump in a very, very small town, which I'm trying to think what town it was. It might have been like Crescent Valley. It might have been Crescent Valley. It was somewhere in that area, and ran out of gas in just middle of nowhere, Nevada. There was one gas station in the town, and it was Saturday night, and they were closed. And my friend and I were just like, "Oh shit!" Like we just completely screwed ourselves. And so like we're like knocking on the doors and the windows, like because there was a house attached to it, so we figured people lived there. And the couple that owned the gas station, they were just getting ready to go out for like a date, and of course we rudely interrupted. And they were super kind, and they saved our butts. And then after that, I took more seriously, which, you know, I lived in Alaska when I was in high school, so I frankly should have known better. It was my fault. Should have known better, and just, you know, anytime you get half empty is empty when you're out past the Mississippi. Like when you're out west, half empty is fully empty, and you get gas. You don't waste time playing around, because you're right, King Yuzi. The U.S. is filled with a great deal of empty space, just tons and tons and tons of it. And right now I'm living on the East Coast. I'm in Massachusetts, and I don't love the lack of space that I feel out here. That is something I will say. Like out west, like it's just there's sky everywhere, and out here it's like when you see a sunset, like everybody in town is like people at the store, people on the road, people, you know, walking their dogs. Everybody is like stops and like, ooh, did you see the sunset? Here nobody sees a sunset. Like in Massachusetts, nobody sees a sunset. It's like, you kidding me? Like, what sunset? Where's the sun? Like after 4 p.m. it's just trees and buildings, and like where'd the sun go? It's like I can tell that it's dark or it's light, but that's about it, you know. So it takes it's very rare. Oh boy. Let me see here. What am I doing? I'm trying to get the comments. I wish they would. Yeah, King Yuzi, you should definitely, if you're ever able to come over here, and you know, if you're ever able to, I mean, that goes for anybody watching this. If you're ever able to come over here, and you want to go some places and take some rad photos, I can take you to some places, some really cool adventures, because I've lived the majority of the last almost 10 years on the road in one form or another. Not full-time on the road. I tried that for 1 year and couldn't hack it, but pretty much a series of climbing trips that comprise 6 months of every year or better is what I was doing until I had a child. And then I kind of planted myself here a couple years ago, 2 years ago in Massachusetts, and even then I've kind of gone back and forth. So I've spent a lot of time dirtbagging, living, you know, kind of boondocking, or whatever you want to call it, living in a very frugal way on the road. And I hate being around crowds. I'm like agoraphobic ish, I think. And especially with national parks. The national parks are so spectacular, but the last thing you want to do is cram yourself into a sweaty sardine can with a whole bunch of people. And I mean, to be fair, it's like, you know, that's what you get when you come from far away, because you don't know where else to go, and so you know, take the most straightforward path to exploring the countryside. But I'm always really happy to help people explore areas of the States when they come over or when they're visiting, so that they can have an experience that's much more their own, something that isn't so much just relegated to going the same places that everybody else goes, but that kind of where you get some local flavor, and you get to, you know, see something, and it's like, I saw that, I took that picture, that was mine. I didn't have, you know, people resting their, you know, telephoto lens on my shoulder as I was leaning on the guy in front of me to stabilize my camera. Or if you have the GH5, you don't need to worry about stabilization, because GH5 does it without it. So much for the camera review part of things, right? But yeah, I love being able to help people have a better time in awesome places than they would have had if they just came in and kind of took the, you know, But I don't usually put that stuff out here on YouTube or in public forums, just because it's, it's one thing if you take someone out there and you take responsibility for them. It's a very different thing if you, just spray information out there and then places wind up getting ruined, which is what always happens. Like, I think it was Men's Health, or Outdoor Magazine, or maybe all of them. At one point, they realized, oh, Zion National Park in Utah is really, really cool. And that was where I was guiding. It was in the town. I lived in the town that was like right on the border of the park. And so all of like the secret spots, they sent a guy in there and like he just blew it all up. And then within, that summer, that season, that tourist season, those spots just got completely trashed and ruined. And eventually, people, stopped reading that particular issue of the magazine. It kind of fell off the front page of Google or what have you. And things kind of went back to normal a little bit, but even still, there's a lot of impact, which, on one hand, you can't blame people for wanting to enjoy the same stuff that brought you to a place, right? That's only natural, but at the same time, it's also, you want to try to disperse that impact and kind of leave special places for, excuse me, for people who are willing to make more effort, rather than just kind of, making everything low-hanging fruit for the masses. Because I think there's a lot of value in going further, and saying, you know what, I'm going to get off the beaten path, I'm going to make my own adventure, I'm going to take a little risk, I'm going to invest in this experience myself. And for me, the camera, to bring everything back to the crass topic of photography, that is one thing that has always pushed me off the beaten path, is less of, any sense of elitism or just not wanting to share public space with people. Crowds of people are like locusts. In many ways, I agree. But for me, it was more just wanting to have the space creatively to make pictures and to do stuff that's my own creatively. That's gotten me to some interesting places and some, places that were a little bit risky and exposed, as you saw in the last video that I published here just yesterday. So, alrighty, guys. Well, it is 10:40 here, my time, and 91 minutes. Not bad. I enjoyed hanging out with you guys. This is really, or gals. I don't know who all was here. I don't think everybody identified themselves or checked in, but I appreciate all of you guys, and gals, individuals. Can't make everyone happy. 3:40 a.m. King Uzi and everyone else who is tuning in from the UK for this live stream. Hello, FemGeek. Glad that you made it. Those of you guys and gals that are tuning in from the UK and elsewhere, you guys are real troopers. Hi, Christopher Holiday. Glad that you are here too. And I will say that if any of you guys that are here do have questions, I'm starting to wind this down by taking questions, which usually leads to another hour of answers and then more questions about the answers. But if you guys have questions, I will take them. And if not, I will kind of move on. King Uzi, you said you watched my documentary. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The documentary, the stories, the films, I mean, they're not real films, videos, I don't know, the non-vloggy type of stuff. I know that's a very blunt and crude way to put it, but the non-vloggy type of stuff that is on this channel, those are all things that are very personal to me, that mean a great deal. And it means a lot to me when people watch and enjoy and engage with those things that I make, because those are the things that, to me, I feel like have a lot of value. Not to say that casual, informal, technical discussions and just chatting, like, that has value too, certainly, but I put a lot into it. So Lad Rob says, thanks a lot, you were starting to look tired. Yeah. Oh man, you should have seen the live stream I did from Virginia. I was so haggard. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and I was just like I was so tired. I literally thought I was starting to fall asleep in between questions. And I was surprised nobody said that, so I appreciate your being very candid, and that's very cool. So yeah, upshot of all this. Oh, FemGeek says, I want to say I really appreciated GH5 review. It's what brought me to you, and I like what I see from your past vids. Keep it up. Thank you very much, FemGeek. That means a great deal. That is always my goal, is to, you know, I mean, I shouldn't say always my goal, but like, I like bringing people in with reviews. To the point of the title of this live stream, I like bringing people in with reviews because I like to give good information, but I also like to really look at creative process and other stuff beyond just the reviews. And so it always means a lot to me when somebody you know, wants to stay connected with me and with this channel beyond the you know, beyond just that piece of information maybe that they wanted to get about a certain camera. And I will certainly have more information, you know, about how I do specific things. One thing I will say, with the GH5, I'm going to make a video about how I use the manual focus. And I don't know that this is something that's that revolutionary or something that I came up with, but just to show people how that autofocus, or I'm sorry, how the manual focus can be used very smoothly to like punch in and fine tune with touch and back button focusing to feel very, very fluid. It's not like, because like on other cameras where you always have to be, you know, adjusting the barrel of the lens to focus, it's a little clunky and wobbly on the camera to like keep the camera steady. And of course with the autofocus being not so good on the GH5, using manual focus is really, can be really mission critical. And so I kind of developed my ability for the first time, really spending a lot of time using manual focus on the GH5. So I'm going to make a video about that. So I definitely want to still talk about, you know, I'm not making a principled stand against discussing things that are technical. I want to do that as well. But I also want to be able to just take the camera that I'm now so excited about having settled on, not have to buy more cameras, not have to review more things and say, is this better than that? And just be like, hey, Sony made an A9. Guess what? I don't care. They can make an A10. I don't need it. I have a camera that really works and allows me to tell stories the way that I want to, in a variety of different circumstances at a high level of, or at a higher level of quality than what I was achieving previously, let's just say. And so being excited about that, I really want to take that camera and go out there and make stuff. Not just talk about what I would do or could do, but I want to actually go out and do that. And I have a huge backlog of stuff that I shot over the last, like in 2017. So I have, I shot a whole bunch of stuff with the Fuji X-T2, excuse me, video from the Middle East when I was in Oman and traveling and climbing there in the mountains and on the coast. Did a lot of cool, so I did a montage of the still photos from there that you may have seen already on this channel, but I have a whole video set piece that has to be done from that. I have a documentary with my dad, and I kind of mentioned the story about how I feel storytelling is important because you document your friends and your life and things that are really important to you, but that are so commonplace that you don't think of them. And that's something that, you know, I really wanted to do a better job with my own family. And certainly the vlog has been helpful for that with my immediate, you know, family. But like with my dad, he's an old guy, so, and not getting any younger, obviously. Of course, neither am I. And my dad isn't, you know, logging and hanging on the ends of ropes and stuff. So in some ways, well, whatever. So I shot a documentary with him, and I got to edit that, and I'm really excited about that. I don't know if any of you guys watch Matt Day, his channel, but he shot a thing about photographing his dad and photographing the people that you love. His channel is really, really fantastic. Really cool guy. Does a lot of predominantly film photography out of Ohio. But, you know, talking about how he took advantage of the opportunities to photograph his dad before his dad passed away and how much that meant to him after the fact. Kind of got me a little sentimental thinking about my dad, and like, so I went and did a little documentary project because my dad is an immigrant from Germany. He came over to Germany after World War II, and his family He was just a very little kid, so his recollection of it is minimal, but he can remember going, being a refugee coming from Poland, and having his dad was in, his dad was actually, my grandfather was in the German army. He was a private in the German army, and he was captured by the Russians, so he was on the Eastern Front. He was a bullet stopper, nothing exotic or whatnot, but yeah, so I wanted to capture that story and tell that, and then of course the time that I spent down with my brother in Virginia. He's got a really cool story of, he's a guy with a master's degree. He's done consulting, with forestry, and he's a very intelligent, well-educated, I mean, he's somebody that has been a huge role model in my life. I'm not trying to say, I mean, I have a college degree in English and philosophy, and may as well be underwater basket weaving, but he's a guy that he has a master's degree, very well educated, and he chooses to go drag chains around and cut down trees and work for himself, and he does it in a very thoughtful, philosophical way. And that's another story that I want to tell, because most of the time there's this impression of people that if you work with your hands that you can't work with your head, or vice versa. And he's a different kind of guy, kind of a weird guy, but I like him. And if nobody got sawn in half in that video, thankfully. And if anybody would have gotten broken in half or sawn in half, it would have been me getting crushed by a tree. So thankfully that didn't happen. And if you saw the grass fire short video that I made, I think it was a week or two ago, that's my brother, that's in that video. That was just some fooling around after work. He was like, "Oh, we're gonna burn the field off then," because he has a 17-acre field or whatever. And he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna burn off the field. Maybe bring your camera if you want," because he always thinks it's really cool that I do this video stuff, and he does stuff that looks cool on cameras with trees falling and fires and all this other, very visceral, spatial, a lot of movement and energy. I mean, it's crazy. Just to interject, Bob Ross, the happy trees, the happy trees, the guy, the painter, right? Trees are incredibly violent. The amount of force and energy that just a nice happy tree just sitting there, the amount of potential energy that is bottled up in a tree, just waiting to be released and just smite you. It is incredible. It is mind-blowing. And so when you put a camera out there and you have chainsaws and all that stuff, it's pretty wild. So anyways, yeah, we burned the field off the one day after work, and I was just going to kind of do it, a music video and just leave it at that. And then he was like, he was all ready to go. He was like, "Okay, well, we want to do a little interview sequence here." And I was just like, "Let me get my camera, or let me get my microphone." Put that on the GH5, went to town on it, and it turned into a little micro documentary about burning, the benefits of burning your fields off. Yes, stray branches will absolutely F you up, King Yuzi. You're right. And I got a comment here just a second ago from JW. I hope you're still with us and haven't given up on my answer. The best lens for video. The best lens for video for the Fuji, it depends on if you're shooting handheld or if it's stabilized on tripod or gimbal. Tripod or gimbal, you may have need for a faster lens just for artistic effect or for shooting in low light. So to that end, I think that the f2 lenses, like any one of the three f2 lenses, either the 23, 35, or 50, which are 35, 50, and 90 or so equivalents. I think any of those are good options for stills, certainly as primes, and also for video if you're not shooting handheld. If you're shooting handheld, trying to shoot handheld video with an unstabilized prime lens with no gimbal, no tripod, on a Fuji camera, it will break your heart, because you will get back into the edit and you will see beautiful colors and picture coming through your camera that's all jittery and shaky, and it's like you're so close but so far away, and it is incredibly annoying. And it makes you hate the camera more than you loved it. At least that was my experience. So for video, you want an OIS lens. An OIS lens for the Fuji for video. It will not do a good job for walking handheld shots. Like IBIS, you can smooth out footsteps if you walk on your tippy toes, like if you flounce a little bit with the IBIS and the GH5, you can get away with a decent amount of movement without it looking bad. I mean, people can still probably tell that it's not a dolly shot, right? But it doesn't, there's no jarring and bumping. It's kind of smoothed out. Walking shots, even with an image stabilized lens on the Fuji X-T2, still going to be pretty rough. But for just stationary handheld, it looks fantastic. And so the lens that I use and recommend is the 18-55, because the 18-55, it's small, it's fairly light, it is not weatherproof. So that is something to be aware of. It is not weather sealed, but it has image stabilization, it's got a good focal length, and it's fast enough for the stuff that I've wanted to do, and that has been, and it also is no slouch when it comes to taking stills. Like I've taken some long exposure shots even with that in lower light, and it's great. FemGeek says, I would never have thought you'd hear somebody say that a tree can be violent. That would be a killer band name. Totally agree. King Uzi recommends artistic effects via vintage lenses and adapters. And Scott's Wild Camper says, I look forward to outdoor films. And yes, Scott's Wild Camper, that is absolutely where my heart is. It's in the outdoors. It's in, because to me, the whole point of having a camera, and I'm still trying to kind of really dial in my messaging. Like, I don't know if any of you guys watch channels where they have very clear messaging where they say, thanks for checking out this channel. What we do here is, and then they say their little spiel, their little tagline. And, you know, for me, it was some version of owning your story, owning your adventure. And really what it comes down to is that, you know, and I don't know if that's clear enough, if that's simple enough, or if it's too, like, philosophical, if it needs to be more straightforward. But at the end of the day, cameras inspire me to go out and do things and go places and see things because I want to have a story for myself. I want to own my story. I want to have something to reflect on that's mine, and I want to have something to give my family and my friends when I'm gone and to share with them even while I'm here. You know, so that's definitely you know, what the value is that I want to convey to people through this channel is, like, you know, I didn't start off with any skill. I started off completely just with a story that I said, this is something I want to share with people. I picked up a camera and I learned, and there's so many people, and like I've gotten so much in such a therapeutic sense. Like I mentioned earlier about, you know, having some issues, struggling with depression and living with a chronic illness, type 1 diabetes or whatever, for 20 years. A camera has enabled me to find really positive ways to deal with things that otherwise would have a much, much darker impact on my life. And that's something that, like, I feel very passionate about sharing with other people, because technology to do this stuff has never been more ubiquitous, never been more accessible, and people get so caught up in pixel peeping and reviews, and, like, hence the title, you know, of this video. People get so caught up in the minutia of stuff and trying to compare themselves to other people that are way further along in their path that they just can't get it up psychologically enough to start and to take that first step. And to me, it's like, you know, just take the next step. That's the most important thing, and just see where that camera will take you. Like, I look at the places where my camera has taken me, you know, these photos, these mountains, like, these are places that I went because of a camera, because I wanted to go there. I saw those pictures in a magazine and I said, hell, I want that picture. I want to take that picture. Why shouldn't I take that picture? And shit, it's there. It's still there. You can go take that picture. You know, that's in British Columbia, in the Bugaboos. My last upload That's the scenic route, and I think that photo is actually in the credits of the outro of my YouTube videos. But that's the whole value. Now, just sorry to face palm there. I'm just trying, not trying to push you guys away, just trying to get the comments back up. King Uzi recommends Northman on video. Most outdoor videos would recommend that to everyone. I will absolutely check that out. And FemGeek asks, are my aspirations with video more for YouTube or web viewing, or do you have plans to dive into something like Netflix, Amazon, or the like? FemGeek, I will say that I would go anywhere that people will listen or watch my content. As one person that struggles to afford to have, to just own a website and fund the domain. I have a Patreon account that I have some people supporting my work on. I am not good at marketing myself, and I am not a good business person. And that is one of the things that that is a weak point that I think, like many artists, I need to do better, and I am working on doing better. I'm building, rebuilding my portfolio site, trying to clarify my messaging, identify clients, and go after that stuff. TED Talk. I would love to do a TED Talk, King Uzi. I just don't know the first thing about. If Ted asks me to talk to him, I'll talk to him. Yes, I have checked out Peter McKinnon, Creative North. I am subscribed to both of those. They are very inspiring to me as well. Although I'll be frank, I mean, Peter McKinnon. When I watch his stuff, it just makes me hate myself, and I'm just like, this guy is so happy and so excited. Even when he's talking about how he struggled, like, it makes it really difficult for me to take him seriously when he talks about, all of this stuff. In like the good old days when he didn't have, pot to piss in, and I'm just like, dude, you know what? I'm like 34 and I got a family and to support, and that is it's hard to swing that. The reality of that is much less glossy and glamorous than what. And he doesn't, I'm not saying Peter McKinnon does not present it as being glamorous. It's just that the reality is I'm seeing it from, like, in the trenches. This is what it's like. It's painful, it's ugly, and I'm here right now. And he's beyond that point, and I'm just like, I hate you. I love you. I admire you. I want to be like you, but I also hate you because, like, you figured out how to jump that creative gap, and I am still, smashing my teeth into the curb every time I try to make that jump and turn creativity into a financially viable thing. So I would love to go on Amazon, Netflix. I mean, I believe there's probably much more money to be made, and some would argue even a larger audience to be had here on YouTube. For me, it comes down to just taking whatever the next step is. And, one of the reasons why I made a push over the last 6 months to get a better camera was because I wanted to have the tools that I knew would be able to allow me to have the ability to create stuff at a higher level that I could really put out there and start advancing myself more from a video standpoint, because I've done audio work professionally and photography professionally, but I haven't done nearly as much video work professionally. And so being able to start moving forward with that, and then YouTube acts as a place to connect to people. As I do that, it's a place to share my work. I also share stuff on my Vimeo channel, because that is, there's a different kind of community there. So I don't put vlogs on Vimeo. I put finished, polished stuff over there. But I haven't, from shooting more stuff, like watching Casey Neistat and saying, okay, instead of trying to make it perfect, what's the best I can do if I give myself this amount of time? And, like, vlogging has really, really helped me to increase my the amount of product that I'm putting out into the web. It's helped me immensely. It's also helped me to be less afraid in front of the camera and get a little bit more comfortable with, being an interactive online personality, if that's the right way to put it. Andy Axe, yes, I am familiar with Andy Axe too. I've watched some of his stuff. It's funny, we all kind of run in the same circles. King Uzi suggests photography tips, tricks, and tutorials. That's something that I have a harder time with, because I feel like, and I mean, I know this is just, I'm my wife always yells at me, and she's probably going to overhear this and scream at me for saying this, but like, I don't know what I have to offer people in terms of tutorials and tricks and tips, because it's like, I look at myself as still a beginner. I mean, I've been shooting for 5 years, but, and I guess, okay, fair enough, I'm not like a beginner. But I look at myself that way, and that's one of the hardest things, is to get over that in your own mind, because in your own mind, you see yourself that way, and that changes the way that you relate to other people. And I have tried doing some tips, like tutorial stuff, like I did a Photoshop series, although granted, you know, there's a lot out there already on Photoshop, but it was more Photoshop for the Fuji. That's a good point. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, just has to be your own perspective. And that's one of the hardest things that to learn in storytelling, in filmmaking, on YouTube, in social media, about all of this stuff. It's like, we watch these channels, and that's why I have to limit the amount that I watch of Andy Axe, of Creative North, of Peter McKinnon, and Casey Neistat. Like, these are creative giants that if you watch them too much, you will just, and it depends on your personality, but for me, like, I have a low tolerance before I start to feel like it goes from being like, that's awesome, I'm inspired to do something, where it kind of gets this tipping point of like, that's so awesome, I will never be able to do that. And in the meantime, like, I feel like I'm failing at everything that I do. So like, I think everybody has to be mindful of that, and you know, but like, realizing that one's own perspective is valid. I mean, I never would have thought, and I still don't think of myself as really giving legitimate camera reviews. Like, what the hell do I know, right? Like, I'm not Dave Dugdale, or what's the other dude from Salt Lake City, Curtis Judd. You know, I'm not Curtis Judd or Dave Dugdale. I mean, these are guys that are like super cut and dry, and just very like, you know. But then I realized, and then I watched some of the videos, and I'm just like, okay, as much as I think I might not be qualified to give any kind of opinion, that guy definitely doesn't, and he can't even use like words that are longer than one syllable, you know. So I have at least something to offer there that I just am not hearing in these other conversations. And yeah, I'm good enough. Like, I don't have to be somebody else. I can just be me. And that whole process of self-acceptance is really hard. And I suspect that any of us, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only one that bumps up against that, even if it's not in a YouTube context, right? Like, just feeling, you know, like you have a story that's really, like, for example, the Scenic Route, the film that I just put out yesterday, very, very personal story. It was a very powerful experience for me, being stuck on the top of that mountain overnight and thinking about, like, I might not make it off of here, and what a stupid way, you know, to not make it back to see my family again, because, like an idiot, you know, I got a low blood sugar climbing a mountain, started late, and got stuck on the summit overnight, and oh, guess what? There's a lightning storm that's blowing in. Like, you know, that was a life-changing experience, and it was also amazingly powerful getting out of that the next day, getting back on the ground and being like, shit, we made it. Like, I can do anything. You know, except hold the camera straight after 36 hours on the go with no sleep or food, or very little food. Right? But sharing that story is very challenging, because you're like, this was so powerful to me. Like, what if I butcher it? What if I make this thing and it sucks? And then you get into the edit and you're just like, the most powerful part of the story, I had the camera turned off because my legs were cramping, and I was legitimately like just trying to keep my head from spinning out and going into a really bad place while I'm sitting up there on top of that mountain. And it's like, I should have been shooting, I could have been shooting, and now the story isn't going to be good enough, and what if? And then you're measuring yourself against your actual, your story that you're creating against your actual experience, and it's hard to cut yourself slack. And so it took me 9 months, which I'm glad that I finally kicked that pig and got it done, but like, it still took me 9 months to make a 11-minute video, you know. But yeah, it is hard for original content to be made, as most things have already been done. But the one thing that I do think about is, like, you know, as much as I like watching camera reviews or, you know, photography channels, it's like, I've always got room for one more subscription. It's not like morning till night my day is packed with watching YouTube, to the point where it's just like, oh, I don't have room. Like, I like this guy's channel, but who can I unsubscribe from to make room for this guy or this girl? Like, there's always room to kind of put your own spin on things, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And you know, I think a lot of it is consistency too. So yeah, my aspirations are ultimately storytelling, you know, but deeper than just telling the stories and getting paid. More about storytelling and the impact. I mean, there's a large social component that has driven me towards documentary work, whether stills or video, because documentaries are very tangible in the way that people take them seriously, people watch them seriously, and people make them seriously. So there's more of an authenticity, there's more impact that goes along with that, you know. So yeah, thank you, FemGeek. I think that's really good advice to, you know, just be yourself, and that's the hardest advice in a lot of times, because, you know, it's easy to focus on what you don't like about yourself when you're constantly looking at yourself in videos and you're just like, that's terrible. But yeah, you know, and even talking about that, I think is an important thing to talk about, because how many other people are on YouTube that you can tell? Like, I watched this one kid, his YouTube channel, and he tries so hard, and like, that's why I haven't unsubscribed. His videos are terrible. They're so bad. And they're like not bad in an original way. They're bad in a, like, I'm trying to be like this channel or that channel. And you can tell that he's trying and just not making it to that point. And so it's like, I want to keep watching him until he gets comfortable being himself, you know, because I'm rooting for him to just be himself and just to, like, get comfortable, you know. And so that's something that I'm struggling with too. I know that's a real issue. Red Inks, hey, good to see you in here on the chat. I have a problem with not getting enough usable video. Most handheld stuff ends up way too shaky. Any tips for getting better video? So there are definitely a couple of ways. I don't know what you're shooting with exactly, and I also don't know if there is any, you know, reasonable discussion of a different camera or suggesting a camera that has IBIS. Yeah, bad channels have a place, and while that comment may not be directly related to your question, Red Inks, yeah, the ways to get better video, more usable stuff, I think a lot of it, and this may sound really, I'm not being glib when I say this, settle down and just slow the hell down. Because this is something that I say, like, present self says to past, like, present Steve says to past Steve, you're an idiot. Why did you get all excited and, like, move the camera around? Just, like, pick your shot. Just, like, don't hit record, just pick your shot and then just hold the damn camera still. Because you had a shot here and then you weren't happy with it, and then you reframed it and you moved it over here, and then there was this and that. So, like, just being really deliberate, and I think practicing is something that can help, like, build up some of those small muscles that are responsible for holding a camera steady. Practice shooting and practice approaching, because the hardest thing is when you get a shot that you're excited about, is not biffing it because you're excited about that shot, and so things are happening, you're charged up, and it's very easy to move the camera a little bit more. So I know that may sound overly simple. I found that there are different ways to hold the camera that can help too. Sometimes I have to stand up to do this effectively, and I'm limited space environment, but, like, practice holding a glass of water while running. Interesting comment, King Yuzi. I have never heard of that, but that makes sense. You know, if you can shoot lower down and you can hold your arms straight in order to get the shot. So I'm standing on my tippy toes so you can see, but you can kind of judge where the camera is. Let's pretend I had shorter arms, right? I have really long arms. So if you're holding the camera down below you with your arm straight, instead of having muscles do the work, like if you're holding it out here, your muscles are doing all the work. This is a climbing technique, actually. So when you're climbing, a lot of people will grab onto a hold and then they'll pull themselves up and they'll hang onto it like this, and then they get tired really quickly because their muscles are doing all the work, because their muscles are holding their arm in this position. But if you let yourself down from that hold and you hang with straight arms and let your skeleton take the weight, then you don't get tired because your bones don't get tired. So if there is a way to do that with the shot, it's like a gravity assist, exactly. That I have never heard that name, but that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to put it. Or the other thing that I do is sometimes, like, I'll put my elbow kind of in against my stomach, and I'll do like so that I can just to kind of stabilize it a little bit in that way. You can get different grips or get like a little cage. I have one over here. So this is $9 on Amazon, so I feel like this is a reasonable recommendation as opposed to saying, hey, just get yourself the GH5. It's got IBIS, man. You can get something like this if you don't have it already, and this gives you the ability to hold the camera a little bit more ergonomically, so you're not just relying on, because I mean, this is kind of a weird way to hold a camera. You're using a lot of small muscles when you're supporting a camera like this. If the camera is on here and you're able to hold it with a full wrap, grip, and really engage different muscles and different body parts into what you're doing, then you're using bigger muscles that are going to have a much easier time handling that load. I don't know if that helps or makes any sense or is overly theoretical, but those are some of the things that I have found. And also really focus on your breathing too, because slowing your breathing and kind of like breathe through the shot, just almost like they say, the marksman is slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and that's very hard to keep in your mind, or at least for me, it's very hard in a lot of cases to keep in my mind while I'm shooting something, especially if I'm shooting something that's like action-y. So those are the ways that I found to be helpful. The other thing is like a monopod. A monopod can be helpful. It's small, it's pretty lightweight, and you can use something like that too. Scott's Wild Camper says, I got one of them there. They're not bad, but the Sony X3000 is a lot better now. They're great for filming on the move. I don't have a Sony X3000. I'm not familiar with that camera, Scott's. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's a learning process for sure to kind of narrow that down, how to do that. Cool. All right, let's see, where are we at? 126 minutes. I'm still going. No, I'm about ready to wrap this up, and I'm gonna go grab some dinner and whatnot. Guys, if you have any other comments, drop comments below on the video. I can always answer this stuff in the comments afterwards, or even make a video perhaps. A lot of times I get ideas for my videos from these questions that I get from you guys, so it's always really helpful to me when you guys do have questions that you share. Unfortunately, I don't know how to save the chat with the video so that people could benefit from that, but I try to repeat. That's why I repeat the questions that you guys, or the comments, that most of the comments I try to repeat. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me here on this live stream. I'm going to do these Fridays are my live stream days. I'm trying to do around this time in the evening, somewhere between like 7:30 and 11. I'm sorry, I know that's like a pretty wide window, and that's like breaking the cardinal rule of YouTube and being consistent at the exact same time, and so that people can set their clocks by you. But I don't always have that luxury because I'm in different places a lot of the time, and with a family, and everybody's got different schedules and stuff. It's a little challenging. So folks, I really, yeah, definitely time for bed. I've kept you guys up in the UK for too long, but I really do appreciate all you guys and ladies being here and being part of the conversation, because it means a lot. So yeah, check out the channel, guys. If you haven't subscribed already, please do that. Like, share any of the relevant videos that you're watching, including this one, and make sure you check us out on social media so you can see more of my photos, because a lot of the photos, they don't make it here on the YouTube, but on my Twitter feed and my Instagram feed, of course, I post a lot of my photography there. All right, guys, I will see you all next week, and thank you so much, and drop comments below, remember, if you have any questions. And yes, I do want to stop streaming.